Members, before the commencement of the meeting, I need to read the emergency evacuation announcement. All right. Before the commencement of the meeting, I need to read the emergency evacuation announcement. Should we be required to evacuate the building, would you please leave the building via the nearest available exit to the chamber? Our assembly point will be in a public car park at the side of the Civic Suite. Please do not delay your evacuation to collect any belongings. Please do not return to the building until given permission to do so by council staff. And please note that this meeting will be audio recorded. Members, please be upstanding to receive the chairman, the chairman's chaplain and the managing director. Please remain standing. Please remain standing while the chairman's chaplain carries prayers.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let us pray. Dear Lord, as we gather together, we praise you for this day and your purpose for it. We set our agendas as we sit in your presence, recalibrate our intentions and refocus our hearts. Your will for our lives does not always reflect our plans. Change them to reflect your will. So we thank you for every seat that has been filled here, for each mind and heart that fills the presence of this room. We thank you. Only you know what we are to set out to accomplish tonight. Only you can see in perfect detail the end of every beginning. Nothing is ever in vain, for even mistakes and missteps are used for good. So gracious Lord, would you bless this meeting, we ask. Be with all those present, helping them to come to a common mind and to be ready to make every moment count. In Jesus' name we ask all of these things. Amen. Amen.
Please be seated. Craig Howell, thank you. Right, the minutes of the... I beg your pardon.
Thank you. Apologies for Councillor Cooper.
Councillor Cooper, thank you. Are there any others? No? Very good. Minutes of the meeting held on the 17th of July 2018. Are they agreed, members?
Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest?
Yes, Chairman, just in case, non-pecuniary about item 13, as my daughter has a horse and we may be discussing something, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Same item, item 12, non-pecuniary interest. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, if Councillor Mrs McPherson could just give me the reason as to why it's a non-pecuniary.
Yeah, sorry, Chairman. It's actually item number 13. It's virtue of my employment.
So
Thank you.
not item 12.
No, item 13.
Item 13.
My error. Sorry, Chairman.
Thank you. Item 4, announcements from the chairman, leader or head of paid service. I don't think there are none. I will merely mention that I have enjoyed enormously a number of engagements on behalf of the council and on behalf of the residents of this district. I won't go through them all because you'll have seen them in the members' bulletin, and I hope to serve you in this similar manner over the next few months. Councillor Cutmore.
Thank you very much, Chairman. It was interesting to note through you, Chairman, that in the Daily Mail, Rochford District was found to be the 10th happiest place to be in the country. And I think that's worthy of note, Chairman, and worthy of putting in the minutes. I think we're a reasonably happy bunch here anyway, but it's nice to know that at least we're considered for something. And this is not just in England, this is in the country. I think there were 2 places in Northern Ireland, actually, that were up there as well. So, you know, let's hope we can keep it that way. And I think we try and do our best to help all others. But it's something that says something for where we live, and we want to keep it that way. Thank you,
Indeed.
Chairman.
Thank you very much. Public questions and member questions on notice. There are none. Business from the last council meeting. There's none. Item 7. To note the minutes of executive and committee meetings held between the period 9th July to 19th October 2018 as listed. Are those noted, members? Thank you. And item 8, to consider any reports from the executive and committees to council. Can I invite Councillor Sperring to present this item?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Well, I think the report that has been submitted, and I'm sure members have read, is very concise, very exact. I think members of the Planning Policy Subcommittee had every opportunity to ask any questions of the officers, who, to the best of my knowledge, answered everything very professionally, very concisely, and I have no hesitation in recommending the items that are recommended for approval to full council. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a very comprehensive report, obviously, but there is something that does rather concern me about the report. We've got a lot of indications in the report that there are going to be considerable costs. In section 1.3, there are discussions going on about costs. We have resource costs and issues, consultation costs. In Appendix 2, 3.3, there is at no point within the report anything indicating a framework for costs here. One of the reasons being why I'm bringing this out is because we are on the JSB going to be joining with other councils. There will no doubt at some point be reports produced, and as we all know as members, we have these reports produced to us, and they in some cases are ludicrously expensive. One of the things that concerns me, in a time when we are very mindful of costs, there is not even a framework of how costs will be allocated between the various councils under the JSB. And so I'm flagging that up as quite a concern. Thank you.
Happy to take it. Chairman, I think as it's been mentioned, I think I need to draw the attention of the member to 5.1, where it says, I think and we're talking here about the statement of community involvement, that the costs will be involved in, can be met from existing budget provision. So it's actually already accounted for as far as this particular agenda item is concerned, and that's what we're discussing at this particular meeting. Thank you, Chairman. I don't know if Mr. Strutton wants to elaborate on that at all.
Thank you, Chairman. I do think Councillor Eve does raise a good point. I raised it myself during the meeting, and I think 1.3 refers to some of the comments I made. But I do think it's a very good point that we're actually being asked to approve a consultation with actually not knowing how much the costs are. It may well be being met from existing budget provisions, but there is no indication of the cost for what we're asking to do here. Thank you.
Chairman, I can only reiterate the point that's been made that the costs of the consultation exercise can be met from existing resources. There is a fairly substantial fund that is available to the planning policy team within the budget as of now.
Thank you, Chairman. Surely, if it's in the budget, we know how much it's going to cost. So why have we got nothing in our report?
But Chairman, if this is what is needed, then I'm sure officers will be able to produce these figures should they be required in future. But as far as I understand it, and officers made it very clear, we have to produce some of these reports. They have to be substantiated, and somewhere along the line we're going to have to find the resources for it. Now, I'm pretty sure if Mr. Scrutton says it's already catered for in the budget, then it will be catered for in the budget.
Thank you, Chair. Perhaps the leader could inform us what is currently happening with regards to the Memorandum of Understanding and the Joint Strategic Plan in respects of how this will benefit the residents, and do we know how our MPs are supporting this infrastructure?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for the question. It's interesting, actually, because I think it's what we're doing actually within the south of Essex is quite innovative, in as much as we're all working together. We're working together to a common aim, which is to actually combine our plans to make sure that they all marry up with each other and take forward something that we can give to government, so we can actually obtain some of the infrastructure and indeed help with some of the infrastructure deficit that we already have. Now, one of the things that we get when we arrange to develop areas is to say, well, the infrastructure's not going. And I'm not just talking about roads. I'm talking about hospitals, dentists, schools, you name it. And, of course, one of the things that I can say, and I think it's already been mentioned, is that we are liaising with our members of Parliament, all of whom I think are absolutely in line with what we're doing, because if we can get this infrastructure investment coming forward, then indeed it will benefit everybody who lives in our district, and indeed everybody who lives and or works within the south of Essex, and that's quite a considerable number of people. Of course, we're working across the south of Essex and with our colleagues in Essex County Council as well, and I know that our MPs have already been lobbying the ministers about how we can actually take this forward. Of course, we've got no solid plans at the moment. We're we're still discussing, and of course it's one of those things, a bit of a bum fight as to what you actually get in the end. But going forward, I think it's an innovative plan that hopefully will come forward. It will be an overarching plan that will look at all of the plans that are coming forward from all of the areas. We do have some areas that are having some difficulties. We know that both Castle Point, Basildon and indeed Brentwood have had problems with their local plans, but hopefully this will actually help them overcome some of those problems because we can actually work together and indeed get that infrastructure in so they can actually develop their plans properly. So I think it's a really good thing coming forward, and I think we should give it every effort that we can. We've already got, I think it's about 800,000, is it, from government? To actually do this, so that it shows you the government is actually investing in what we're doing and sees that we're actually doing something that will be a benefit to us all. And that's right across South Essex, of course. So going forward, I think it's going to be something that we really need to invest in and make sure that we get the best use of for Rochford. And I really am very keen to do that. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of points, if I may, following on from our leader. I don't disagree with him at all, that talking to other authorities and liaising with them is a very good idea, and we should do it. I would hesitate to say that it could work well. I know this has been used in the north of the county, maybe slightly differently, where a number of authorities have combined together with Essex, and their garden, I'll call it a city because I think it's 24,000 houses in it, has been thrown out by the inspector, so it doesn't always work well. So I think we have to be very careful how it works in our case, and I'm sure it will work better in the south of the county than the north so far. I'm glad he raised the £800,000 because I think perhaps that goes back to one of the points Councillor Eve has made, and I've made in the past and at the Planning Policy Subcommittee, is that yes, there are grants received of around £800,000. I think it might be, there's 2 grants, I think it might be slightly more now, but this money is going for consultation somewhere and for planning somewhere, but we seem to have failed to ask for any money within these grants, and I think perhaps we should up our game, and when grants are being applied for by or through a seller, we should be asking for funding for ourselves for some of the consultations we should be undertaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to ask a question to our Deputy Leader. I understand there is a launch taking place in December to do with the A127 economical corridor. Is there any further information on this, please?
Thank you, Chairman. It gives me an opportunity to mention this, but strictly speaking, it's in my role as County Councillor. We are putting together a task force looking at the A127 economic corridor, which takes the A127 as its centre spine and ranges from, in the south, the River Thames, and in the north, the River Crouch. And it's the whole of the A127, right from Gallows Corner, right through to Cuckoo Corner. We're working with all of the councils along the corridor, including Thurrock and Southend. We're putting things together. We've got MP support, and we're looking to perhaps hold a launch of this at Southend Airport somewhere around about the beginning of December. I have got a couple of dates in mind, but it's not been confirmed as of yet. So once those dates become available, I will let you know further and more about it. But if any councillor or any member wishes to talk to me after the meeting, I'd be only too happy to fill them in with some more of the detail.
That the Council resolves that the draft addendum, we'll call that addenda, shall we, to the adopted statement of community involvement at appendices A, B and C to the officer's report be consulted on for 4 weeks. Is that agreed, members?
Agreed.
So maybe noted that I'm abstaining on that vote, please.
Thank you. The second recommendation at paragraph 4 on page 812. Are there any members wishing specifically to speak on that item? No, in which case I'll go straight to the recommendation that the Council resolves that option 3 as detailed in paragraph 4.1 of the officer report be adopted to progress local plan making in the short to medium term, subject to sufficient resources being made available to facilitate this. Is that agreed, members? Agreed. Thank you. I now move to item 9 on the agenda. Report on urgent decisions. There is none. Item 10, report of the leader of the work of the Executive, Councillor Cutmore.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Chairman, through you, this is the second ordinary council meeting of the 2018-19 municipal year, and I would like to welcome all members. Since the meeting on the 17th of July, the Executive has met to endorse the facilitation of a tourism forum with a view to co-creation of the Discover 2020 Festival and a tourism strategy for Rochford District, noting the tourism forum event on the 11th of October 2018. And we've agreed the asset disposal framework and amendment to the lease policy. Other matters that my executive colleagues and I have dealt with include approving the Environmental Health Service Plan for 2018-19, adopting the Corporate Inclusion and Equality Policy and Equality Objectives 2018 to 21, as well as the Housing Allocation Policy 2018 and Housing Allocation Policy Short Guide. Confirming the Article 4.1 direction made by the Council on the 19th of April 2018, submitting a formal response to Castle Point Borough Council's 2018 local plan consultation, noting that the Authority Monitoring Report 2016-18 will be published as part of the Council's evidence base for planning. As always, Chairman, I will be happy to take any questions from members in respect of the work of the Executive, and I'm sure my Executive colleagues will be happy to contribute where appropriate. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Cutmore. Councillor Mr Hoyer.
Thank you, Chairman. It's only a brief question, and really perhaps either the leader or perhaps Angela Hutchins might update us on this. I did attend the tourism forum on the 11th of October. I did think it was quite interesting, and obviously there was a lot of investment in officer time in that event. I know it's still fairly soon after the event, but I just wondered if Councillor Cutmore or Angela Hutchins, how they felt the event went and whether or not it will prove fruitful. Thank you.
Chairman, I thought it was an extremely good event. I think there was a very eclectic audience, which actually proves that it's very popular throughout our district. I think many of our parishes, I think perhaps all our parishes attended and took a very keen interest in what was going on. And it was very interesting to hear all the different things that were actually coming out of that meeting, things that were coming out of the woodwork that we didn't know about our own district. And some of the history and some of the architecture and features that are unique to Rochford. We have a fantastic history within our area. I think that's in our reflected in our motto, which is our heritage, our future, because we have an eye to our heritage, and there's a lot to talk about. We've been here a long time, Rochford. We were certainly here before Southend, which was the south end of Prittlewell originally. And of course we had the Tudor connection, we have the smuggling collection. I'm pleased to say we've got the connection with Darwin now, etc. And of course we've got very great jewels like the Wallasey Wetlands, which is a fantastic development and thing that's coming forward. So we've got some real assets here. We need to develop them properly, do them properly, and we need to celebrate properly as well. The church up at Ashington, which is very near to where I live, Ashington Minster, will be 1,000 years old in 2020, and that's quite something. So I think we really need to celebrate these things celebrate them to make sure that local people as well as people nearby know and put Rochford really on the map. And I think that really helped to actually discuss that and see how we can take it forward. Can't do everything. What I don't want is one event to drown out all the other events, but we'll take that forward. I don't know if you want to comment further at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, there were over 50 separate, events and ideas that came out of that particular session, and along with a number of volunteers who agreed to give up their time to be part of the organising committee. I've been collating the slides and the materials from RSPB to put onto our website, and I have in draft 2 emails which will go out to everybody following up from that meeting, which points them to those to the website where more details are, and invites the first meeting of the organising committee later on into November.
In that case, we'll move on to item 12. Oh, I'm sorry, item 11, I missed that one. Motions on notice, there are none. Item 12, can I ask Miss Angela Law to present this?
Chairman. Members, the purpose of this report is to amend the arrangements for the homelessness applications appeals and amalgamate the appeals and the licensing committee together. The recent legislative changes imposed by the Housing Reduction Act 2017 has provided an opportunity to reduce costs and officer time by joining the 2 committees together. The 2017 Act introduced new measures which allowed for a right to review at every new stage. This at present would be impractical to administer under the Council's current procedure, whereby there is a discretionary step of an appeal. The remaining functions of the Appeals Committee, dealing with taxi appeals and policies and community right to bid reviews, can be transferred to the Licensing Committee. For your information, members, to date we have had no community right to bid reviews, and there have only been 2 appeal meetings convened for taxis this municipal year, the second of which is scheduled to take place next week on the 6th of November. So with this in mind, I would recommend that the new structure comes into effect on the 7th of November. Chairman, as well as the 2 recommendations, I'm also seeking Council's agreement to amend the terms of reference to include the current terms of reference for the Appeals Committee, with the addition of reference to community right to bid and animal welfare licensing, with the wording as follows. To exercise the Council's functions under the Licensing Act 2003, the Gambling Act 2005, and all associated or amending legislation. To exercise the Council's functions in relation to all appeals, licensing and registration as specified in Schedule 1 to the Local Authorities' Functions and Responsibilities, England Regulations 2000 as amended, the Assets of Community Value Regulations 2012, and the Animal Welfare Licensing of Activities Involving Animals Regulations 2018. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Weston.
Thank you, Chairman. I was going to ask that question about when this committee will be set up. I've noticed or understand you'll say November. I do have a little concern on that because obviously we've got a lot of experienced councillors between the 2 committees, and people who sit on the licensing committee, have they had the training on the appeal side? Does that mean to say that we'd have to set up a training course very quickly in case any appeals come through? And I understand also you're just keeping the number of members on the licensing committee for the appeals committee combined together. You're not going to add any more members. Can you just confirm? Thank you.
So, Chairman, the new Licensing Appeals Committee will be 15 members, as the Licensing Committee is now. Training will be provided to all members, especially with the new animal welfare licensing legislation that's in. My officers at the moment are in the process of training themselves, so we're waiting for guidance from central government to come through. As soon as that's through, we will provide training. I don't anticipate there to be any appeals at the moment, because we're still receiving new applications. Sorry, what's the second question?
Sorry, I can't remember what else I asked.
Animal welfare training.
No, just the appeals training. No, you said about the training.
Yeah, appeals training will be given to all members.
Yeah. Can I come back on that? So obviously the appeals committee is going to be dysfunctional. It's not going to be the appeals committee is going to be no longer. It's going to go into the licensing committee are going to take on the appeals. My other question is why are we doing it so early in November? Why can we not wait until later on, maybe beginning of next year? That was the only question, really.
I think the priority here is because of the new Homeless Reduction Act legislation. So that needs to be amended quite quickly to take into account the new act. Our current procedures do not, it's not practical to administer under the new act. The remaining functions, as I explained, I mean, members, Chairman, I'm guide very if you want to wait till the new municipal year, possibly, but I don't think that would be highly practical. Might as well just, because there's not been many reviews or appeals as such anyway.
I mean, this is something we can consider. Do we have a proposer on that?
If I may.
Yes.
Well, Chairman, I'm listening to the discussion. I think my question essentially is, what would be the risk factor to the council if we were to postpone this action till the start of the new municipal year, obviously into next year? Because it does seem that the necessary training is going to be somewhat of a clamour to organise, and I think the practicality of rearranging the committees as well is perhaps an unfortunate exercise to have to go through. So if we could have comment on the actual risk factor to the council and attempt to quantify that, and then dependent on that answer, I might be happy to propose that we postpone this to the start of the new municipal year. Thank you.
Chairman, the main risk factor would be with regards to the Homeless Reduction Act procedure because of the new reviews that's coming in every stage. At present, our current procedures allow for an extra discretionary step, which is not in line with legislation. So it's out of step with the current legislation. So I think that would be a risk to the homelessness side of things. With regards to the taxi licensing and community right to bids, as I said, Chairman, I'm open to perhaps to consider, well, it's really with members, if members would like the appeals committee to remain in place just to deal with the taxi and the community right to bid side, but have the Homeless Reduction Act homelessness reviews taken out of it with immediate effect.
I have Councillor Mr Hoy. Is it on this particular subject? Yes. Okay, please go ahead then.
Thank you, Chairman. A couple of points, and maybe it might be relevant to this as well. I don't have a problem with the appeals and licensing being combined. Perhaps for Councillor Mrs Weston's point about training and experienced members, there's nothing to prevent group leaders changing the membership of the licensing committee it is. There's nothing to stop them putting people who are experienced in appeals onto it now. They can do that at any time, and that takes effect immediately. I think, is it 6 members of appeals? I've just read the report and I can't remember already. So I don't think that would be a problem. I think there is an issue around training, and I probably agree with that to some extent, to get the remaining members trained up sufficiently if there are appeals. But if there are 3 or 4 members on there who are experienced in appeals already, that shouldn't be a problem, I think. My concern, however, still comes back to the date of 7th of November, which is the date you're saying the change will take place on. The problem is this isn't within the Constitution yet. So how is, if this committee isn't constitutional, the Constitution hasn't been approved with these changes, and it can't be, I assume, before the December meeting unless we have an extraordinary meeting. So I don't know how legal that is. Can we have an answer on the legality of a committee which isn't within the Constitution? Thank you.
I've been assured by my colleague it can be done. Sorry, could you just repeat that question for me?
Through the Chairman again. As the committee is not within the Constitution, they are separate committees. would this be legal? Would there be? I have a lot of problems recently, and I raised it at licensing on another point. Words I find are very important, and if we have a committee which hears an appeal which isn't within our constitution, would that make the appeal decision null and void?
The decision
I have concerns over that.
The decision of tonight's council will be what is introduced in this new committee, as I've said, with the new terms of reference.
Chairman, but it isn't within the constitution. That's my real problem. Surely we have to change the constitution.
Chairman, if council agrees to adjust one of its committees and the arrangements associated in terms of reference, then whenever council decides that takes effect from, the constitution will be adjusted to show the new arrangement. Chairman.
Councillor, Mr. West.
Chairman, I'd like to propose that we put it back till May next year for the discussions that have gone this evening. All I wanted is a seconder on that, please. Thank you.
We have a seconder. You're seconding that, thank you. In that case, the motion before us is to defer. Did you want to say something?
Get some clarification on the homelessness reduction side of things. The homelessness reduction. The homelessness reduction. Well, it will impact Louisa's team in dealing with homelessness reviews.
All right. Before we proceed to that, perhaps Ms. Law can give us some advice.
Chair, I would like just some guidance with regards to the homelessness appeal side of things. Are we deferring the whole item to maybe, because if you do, that will mean changing the homelessness review process, which will impact on your housing officers currently dealing with the reviews.
Chairman, sorry, I'm still concerned that we're pushing this too quick. Solicitor, I think we just need some more information. You say about the Homelessness Act. I mean, how many homeless? You said more if this is time. I'm asking you a big question, I suppose. Now, how many homelesses are we going to be looking at in the next sort of four months or so? Are we?
We're advised that if the motion that you've put forward includes the homelessness situation, then we would be subject to some difficulty. Now, one option, of course, open to you is if you're minded to exclude from your motion the reference to the homelessness.
The homelessness appeals. The homelessness reviews.
The homelessness reviews. Yeah.
Excuse me, Chairman. Am I on the understanding that one of the committees can deal with the homelessness at the moment, if that comes up between now and May?
Can I allow Councillor Cutmore to speak? He's been waiting for quite patiently to do so.
Chairman, just to help out hopefully the officers and our colleagues as well, but I propose that perhaps we amend our proposal to the 7th of November to next May. But as far as, and I think what the officer is suggesting is, as far as the homelessness legislation is concerned, that indeed that actually moves over to the licensing committee with the appropriate training where appropriate, and then the actual whole thing is consolidated from next May. So you're actually moving over the other two things, but not the homelessness side, and hopefully that would satisfy the legislation as well as our own members. Thank you, Chairman.
Sorry, Chairman, just for clarity, the homelessness wouldn't be moving anywhere. The reviews stay with officers in accordance with the current legislation. So we are not moving the homelessness reviews anywhere. Currently, the homelessness reviews are a discretionary step that our council have, that no other council has. That is not in line with legislation.
Chairman, that's exactly.
Yeah.
Happy with that.
Councillor Mrs. Weston, would you be happy with that?
Sorry, Chairman. Yes, I think we'll be happy with that.
And you'd be happy with that? Councillor Smith?
I think we need to clarify.
Councillor Smith, you're happy with that?
Chairman, I don't know if this complicates the situation, but the recommendation that's in front of members is, for one, that the policy of providing an intermediary appeal route to the appeals committee is discontinued. So it seems to me that that is exactly what is being said. That intermediary route is deleted from the appeals committee. In terms of the second recommendation, that the licensing committee absorbs the functions of the appeals committee and is renamed the licensing and appeals committee, the membership of which is the same as the current licensing committee. Well, the latter part of that sentence would be subject to what council determined at annual council in May. But what needs to be added to that recommendation is that is approved and becomes operational in May.
Sorry, Chairman, can I come back again? On the recommendation, what we're saying there, we can approve number 1 and put back number 2.
Correct.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Can I propose that? Sorry.
So that you're amending your proposal, and you're seconding that as amended. Did you want to speak? I thought you had your hand up.
No, thank you, Chairman.
Right.
I'm fine with
Okay.
that, thank you.
Councillor Mountain.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a slight bit of clarification. We are amending point 2 until May. For what purpose?
Correct.
What's going to happen between now and May? Why is it being deferred until May, please?
Oh, sorry, Chairman. A, the training, which obviously is essential, and clarification of what's obviously needed and required on the Constitution, as someone else said, one of the councillors said. So.
Can we hear that for clarity, Councillor Mrs. Weston? What exactly is now being proposed?
Sorry, it's the training. On the second one, it's really to do with the training.
Right, so we are saying, forgive me if let me just confirm if I have this correctly understood. Part 1 of the proposal, that the policy of providing an intermediary appeal route to the appeals committee is discontinued, and that is forthwith, yeah? And the paragraph 2, that the functions of the appeals and licensing committees, etc., that's deferred until May. Presumably until the next municipal year. Yeah.
So just for clarification, the implementation of the new committee would be in May, but in principle, the council is agreeing this evening that the two committees would be amalgamated. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Mrs. Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There seems to be quite a lot of confusion, and I think it comes from the amalgamation and the proposal. There's no date in there in the report, which was unhelpful. The 7th of November, I can understand the concern there, but the reasoning and the logic for this amalgamation was to save costs and to save officer time. So we've worked at 2 issues. One was training, which Councillor Hoy has very ably pointed out. We have members that are trained, and the membership of committees is up to the group leaders, so that can be accommodated. The other issue that I think hasn't been very well clarified tonight is the Constitution. Whilst we can actually agree to a change of Constitution, we also need the detail, because it affects more than one part of the Constitution, as I'm sure everyone knows. Certainly our officers should know. And I accept what Councillor Weston, the concern that you have, and I do think it should be deferred. but not until May. I think it should be deferred until the next full council meeting. We agree in principle, but we need to see the alterations to the Constitution, as alterations to the Constitution have to come before full council before they can be adopted. So therefore we need that the alterations to the Constitution to be added to this report so that we can agree the two things together. Otherwise you've got an agreement that can't properly be implemented. So certainly I would say defer till next full council, or if so I would propose that amendment if Councillor Weston is happy with that. And then that also allows for any training. Second the amendment. Thank you.
Right, let's be clear, Councillor Mrs Mason. Will you just set out exactly what you're proposing now?
What I'm proposing is that tonight we agree in print. Item 1 I think is read. So item 2, that we agree in principle that the licensing committee will absorb the function of the appeals committee and will be renamed the licensing and appeals committee with effect from the next full council, when the alteration to the Constitution will also be put to full council, so that that can be adopted at the same time, so that we have our Constitution and our actions in line. And the training schedule can be drawn up, if necessary, in the time span. That gives plenty of time for that to be done, although I don't think there's a great deal of need for training. But if there is, it can be done in that time frame. Thank you. Is that clear?
That's your amendment. You see amendments agreed.
Yeah. Is it practical? Yes. Do we have a seconder to that proposal? We've had a second. You seconded it. Thank you. In that case, we need to vote on the amendment. Unless anybody wants to speak to the amendment first. Councillor Cutmore.
Well, Chairman, we've already got a proposal to do it from May. I can't see a problem with that. We're not talking about a great deal of funding here, and I think it's something that the status quo will carry on. I see no reason why we can't do that in May. I don't see what the hurry is, frankly. So let's carry on with the original motion.
I think the difficulty is deciding what we're going to vote upon, because we have been advised that for legislative reasons. Okay, all right. Councillor Eaves.
Thank you, Chair. By the same reasoning of a leader, I can't see any reason being why we can't actually defer just until the next council.
Angela, are we going to be in trouble on this?
Sorry,
Are we going to be in difficulty on this?
No, we dealt with the homelessness, so it's to be down to the council.
Chairman, put the amendment to the vote. Do you want me to stand?
Yes, well, I think we will need to know exactly what the amendment is. Let's get it read out again. Okay. Councillor Hookway.
Thank you, Chairman. Having listened to the discussions and the debate around this matter, it would seem that Councillor Mason's proposal would be the most practical and sensible and logical way forward. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, yeah.
So, Chairman, first of all, you've got an amendment to the original motion that and the effect of the amendment is firstly, as with the original motion, that recommendation 1 in the report stands, that the policy of providing an intermediary appeal route be discontinued, and secondly, that the absorption of the licensing committee with the functions of the appeals committee and its renaming be deferred to the next meeting of full council to provide for a report showing what the constitution would look like and any training implications. That's the amendment, Chairman, that you need to take
Sorry,
first.
point of order, that wasn't exactly what I said. I didn't say it was deferred. I said it was agreed in principle tonight, the implementation to take place at next full council with the changes, necessary changes to the Constitution. I wasn't trying to defer the decision, defer the implementation. Thank you.
It seems to me, though, that if you're saying we need a change to the Constitution, we can't agree it in principle because that would be outside the Constitution.
Sorry, as a point of order, we can agree to change from a future date. We can agree in principle. What we're agreeing is that the full thing will be done in December.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I disagree with you.
Okay. Okay.
Chairman, you need to put that to the vote.
All right. In that case, we'll put to the vote the amended. Did you want to speak, Councillor Mountain?
Sorry, thank you, Chairman. It's in relation to Councillor Cutmore's comments. The reason that I'm in favour of the amendment is because the wording of the recommendation as isn't clear, and the answer to my question why wasn't really answered in the wording that was presented. Councillor Mrs Mason came up with an amendment which I think covers those questions, and that's why I will support the amendment. Thank you.
Okay. So item 2 then is going to be deferred until the next council meeting. No?
Those in favour of the amendment? Shall I talk me to?
Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. So you're now looking for a vote in favour of the amendment.
Excuse me, Chairman, I'm getting
clarify.
completely and utterly confused on all this.
Well, I'm glad I'm not the only one.
I've made a recommendation on the two things,
Councillor Mrs.
which we've said first.
Please, Councillor Mrs Mason, for the avoidance of doubt and absolute clarity, will you please indicate exactly what is your amendment so that we can vote on it?
Yes, certainly. I'm happy to assist the council, Mr Chairman, in that respect, as there seems to be untold confusion. That the licensing committee will, so this is a policy, will absorb the functions of the appeals committee and will be renamed the licensing and appeals committee. I don't think we need the comment on membership. With effect from the next full council meeting, when the changes to the Constitution will also be presented to full council, and to allow for training to be implemented in the interim. Where necessary. Thank you.
Those four. As for those four. Who's voting for that, Chairman?
Right. Will all those who are voting in favour of that amendment raise their hands? And that, yeah. Those against?
So the amendment was lost, Chairman.
Mm-hmm. The amendment is lost.
So you now go to the original motion, Chairman.
So we now go to the original motion, as it is written in the report.
Shall I? Yeah. Chairman, the original motion is about report recommendation 1 being agreed and report recommendation 2 being put in place with effect from the beginning of the next municipal year. Those in favour, Chairman.
All those in favour, please raise their hands. Those against?
My vote against recorded in the minutes, please, Chairman.
Where are you asking?
That's fine, Chairman.
Yeah.
That's fine.
That's fine. Yep. Okay.
Yeah, that's the end of that item, Chairman.
Right, that's the end of that item. That recommendation was approved. We now go to item 13. That will be Miss Angela Law, please.
Chairman, this report proposes to adopt the new arrangements in relation to the animal welfare licensing of activities involving animals regulations 2018. In light of the new regulations, the report sets out the proposed delegation of powers and the new fee structure, which is being calculated on a cost recovery basis. Finally, it also seeks authority to be delegated to the, dare I say, Licensing and Appeals Committee to approve the amendments to the policy in relation to any new regulations coming through thereafter. In response to a member query received today, the 2018 regulations only cover the following licensable activities: the selling of animals as pets, providing or arranging for the provision of boarding for cats or dogs, hiring out horses, breeding of dogs, keeping or training animals for exhibition. And for clarity, in relation to penalties, it is an offence to breach any of the licence conditions or to not comply with an inspector's request or obstruct an inspector on their inspections. This could result with an unlimited fine. Anyone who carries out any licensable activities without a licence would be liable to imprisonment for a term of 6 months, a fine, or both. Any illegal activity that amounts to cruelty to animals will be covered under the Animal Welfare Act. So, Chairman, recommendation for this report is on page 13.4 to resolve to approve any amendments to the policy in relation, that the authority to approve any amendments to the policy in relation to animal welfare licensing.
Chairman, sorry to interrupt. We're having terrible chatter behind us. We can't hear what is being said.
Chairman, would you like me to repeat?
Yes, please.
So, Chairman, shall I start from the beginning? Would you like me to start from the beginning or carry on? So, Chairman, the recommendations are that authority to approve any amendments to the policy in relation to animal welfare, licensing of activities involving animals, regulations be delegated to the Licensing and Appeals Committee. The authority be delegated for granting, refusing, renewing, varying, suspending or revoking licences under the Animal Welfare Licensing of Activities Involving Animals, Regulations 218, on the basis as set out under paragraph 3.1 of this report, and that the licensing fee schedule appended to the report be adopted. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Mrs McPherson.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to stand up and say thank you to the officer for the report. This is a very important report, and I was quite saddened that people did want to chat through it. But thank you, officer.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a quick item, just if you could clarify this for me. The report refers to renewing of licences, but in Appendix 1, all it actually says is application fees. Are the application fees the same as renewal fees? I'm assuming there will be a fee for renewing licences, but that's not actually set out or defined.
Sorry, Chairman. These are application fees. It does include renewal fees, so application stroke renewal fees.
Councillor Mrs Mason.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Just a very small point. When the officer read out the proposal 1, she said the Licensing and Appeals Committee. We've just determined that we either have a licensing or an appeals committee, and the recommendation in writing says licensing committee, so I assume that the recommendation is as written. Perhaps you would clarify that.
Chairman, at the time of writing the report, there was just a licensing committee. Perhaps we should amend it to licensing and appeals committee.
Yeah, I think. Shall we just amend the recommendation?
Sorry, Mr Chairman, the officer misunderstood again. It's delegated to the licensing committee. I have no problem whatsoever with the recommendation. It was the fact that she actually read out something that wasn't there. Thank you.
Do we just amend that?
fine as it is, Chairman, because you haven't got this looks it's fine as it is.
How so?
Because the change committee is with effect from the next municipal year, not this one. So it's still a licensing committee.
Yeah, well, I'm advised that it is perfectly okay because the change won't take effect until the next municipal year.
Mr. Chairman, that is exactly what I was pointing out. But unfortunately, when the officer read out verbally, she said Licensing and Appeals Committee.
I see.
So that was the
Chairman,
only
perhaps,
thing.
perhaps if my apologies if I did
Yeah,
say that.
that's
It's
all it
probably my
was.
nerves after the last report.
I thought you were referring to the. Okay,
No,
fine.
no.
We'll leave it as it is. Councillor Mr. Mason.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. As Councillor McPherson says, this is a really important set of measures that's being put in place. The officer spoke about the penalties that can be exacted upon people who breach these licensing conditions. Can I ask what procedures, what process the council will have in inspecting these facilities to ensure that all licensing and lawful activities are undertaken in accordance with all of the regulations that are set out?
Chairman, the officers carry out, upon any renewal and application, inspections in the first place. They will carry out throughout the year regular checks on them, and this is a new licensing regime for the animal welfare side of things. They will, for certain inspections, they do require a vet to be present, so they have engaged with local vets to do that. This is fairly new, and it's almost a suck it and see as to how it goes. So to embed the new procedures, we don't actually have a set regime as yet as to how often and how much, but we do also rely on the public to help tip us off on any illegal activities.
Chairman, obviously tipping off, I'd rather call allegations until proven it's a criminal offence we're dealing with here. I'm a little concerned that the council hasn't actually got any procedures yet to actually undertake inspections, and more particularly how we're going to follow up appropriately on matters that are subject to allegation from the public or other people. And also we haven't got a clue, it seems, again, what costs are going to be incurred by the council. Is there a budget?
The fees that we charge are based on a cost recovery basis, which takes into account the management of the licensing, the license fees, and any enforcement issues. Those fees will be renewed annually. At present, this is a new fees schedule, so we will have to, with the finance team, review that and see if we are charging the right costs.
If there are no... Oh, sorry. Mr. Griffin, Councillor Griffin.
Thank you, Chairman. Southend-on-Sea Borough Council have an animal warden. Do we have a similar person, or can we call on the services of another council at all?
Chairman, I'm not clear as to what the animal warden does in Southend. We have licensing officers carrying out the inspections, and they're trained to carry out those inspections.
Okay, thank you very much.
Are the recommendations agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Right, item 14, and I'll ask Mr. Hosson if he will present, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try to be brief. The report sets out to seek approval for the appointment of Southend Borough Council to undertake improvement scheme at a cost of £184,000 to the car park and access at Cherry Orchard Country Park. The report sets out the more of the detail. The recommendation is that £184,000 contract for the car park expansion and new access route at Cherry Orchard Jubilee Country Park be awarded to Southend Borough Council, and that £9,000 is drawn down from the hard soft infrastructure reserve to make up balances required for the above works. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Wilson, I wasn't sure whether you were signaling or merely pointing to Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not against this proposal in principle, but I'd like to have a couple of questions answered. The first is at paragraphs 2.2 of the report. We've got the scope of the project will be for 80 car parking spaces. And my first question is that at paragraph 3.3, we're proposing that we're going to spend an extra £9,000. Have we considered, rather than spending extra money, actually restricting the scope? In other words, having less parking spaces? That's question one. And the second one is that paragraph 3.2, we talk about the benefits of transparency of having Southend Borough Council do this for us. Again, I don't have a problem with that at all. But my question is, have we been charged? In other words, has Southend Borough Council put their own margin on this? And are we confident that that's actually less than it would cost us to run the exercise in-house, the procurement in-house? And my final question really is just a question. At paragraph 4.1, we're saying that if there's a delay of approximately 12 weeks, we would have to run our own competitive tender. I'd just like to know what that 12 weeks is. Why would we have to run a competitive tender if we run over the 12 weeks? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. On the first one, yes, we could cut the cloth to try and reduce the size of the car park, but it becomes a little bit of a sort of a back and forth process if you're not careful. So 80 spaces, it was a neat design, if that makes sense. So you're going to start trying to trim down 1, 2, 3 or 4 spaces. The additional cost is not so much in the design of the car park, so actually the cost came in slightly under. It was additional work such as a height barrier and fencing around the edge. So in many ways I felt that it was best to keep with that design. On the second issue, in terms of transparency, no, there are no additional costs. So I've actually seen the costs that are quoted by their contractor. So we are paying directly, if you like, in that sense. It is, I guess, in much of their interest to see us delivered as part of the airport scheme as it is us. So they're willing to assist in this matter. On the third one, the 12 weeks is very much an estimate. So of course there is a procurement process. Sorry, that probably isn't so too clear. That would be a part of the competitive tender process. So that would be that the 12 weeks is us putting that out. So that it's not, and then the competitive process. That is a competitive tender process. Will be us taking the 12 weeks. Thank you.
That's Rees.
Thank you, Chair. With regards to the initial costs that we've been allocated against the S106, can you explain to me how that figure was arrived at? And I'm presuming that this was an allocation specifically for the car park in the first place, and why we've ended up with a shortfall. Thank you.
I mean, it's an estimate at the time, so you know, and I'll be truthful with the sort of the works that you're talking that I think is a shortfall. That's quite reasonable. I mean, it's an estimate based off you know, an 80 space car park with very rough plans. So what you're going to expect the prices to shift slightly with topography surveys and the like. So in many ways, I'm quite pleased with the estimate. And what we've done is we said, actually, there's a bit of additional work here that probably wasn't considered. And that is mainly the height barriers and some of the sort of fencing around the edges. But I'd say apart from that, the pricing is pretty spot on.
Gazri?
Thank you, Chair. It just concerns me that if we've got the opportunity within S106 agreements to to actually raise the right figure. Historically, recently, it seems to me that a lot of the budgets that are being put to S106 fall short. Would it not actually be something that we could be looking to maybe be a little bit more realistic, knowing that prices always go up, and that we would be looking to do things in a few years in advance to be a little bit nearer the figures that we actually need to fund these projects? Thank you.
I think usually 106 is a term to contribution. So in many senses, it's down to the it's down to the individual negotiations for each one. So I wasn't privy to the exact negotiations of each contribution. So whether it should be 100% or not is I guess down to the merits of that individual planning application and the conditions that have been imposed. So a bit of it's almost a bit outside my remit what you're asking at the moment, but in many ways I felt that was a good price we got. I said, and what we've done is actually put on some additional works onto that at the same time. So things like the height barrier probably would never have been a part of that negotiation. It is in our interest as well to have this car park. So I think it was always viewed as a contribution to some extent. So the fact we've managed to use that funding to almost 100% fund that car park is probably quite a good thing.
Okay, unless there are any other questions, Councillor Cutmore.
Chairman, through you, I'm very pleased to see that this is coming forward, and I'm very pleased to see that we've actually got virtually the whole contribution towards the car park and the works that are being proposed. I think we're getting them at an extremely reasonable price. I think the officer's said now about 3 times the fact that the difference in the price is about the fencing and the height barrier, etc. So we're actually getting the money for the car park, we're getting the money for the alterations, and we're getting it for free, Chairman, because it's part of the 106 agreement that's done. So I think as far as negotiation of 106 agreements is concerned, it's absolutely spot on. And I don't see what the problem is. So, myself, I'm very pleased that we're going to get this facility for Cherry Orchard. I think it will make a real difference to the access to the park, because you've got a proper roundabout that takes it forward, and I really am pleased to support it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. In that case, I shall now... Councillor Wilson. Thank you. Thank you. Is that agreed then, members? Agreed. Thank you. That being the last item on the agenda, I'll close the meeting at 9:40. At 8:40.
Members, please be upstanding as the Chairman and Managing Director leave the chamber.
I'll come back for these.